What's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Dane's Desk. Today's episode we'll be discussing is Trump's education agenda sanitizing racism from U.S. history. Let's go ahead and dive in. Problem. So, American teachers are very concerned right now since since Trump was elected president. The concern is that he's going to be using his position, his executive powers to quote unquote sanitize racism from U.S. history, along with a couple of other things. He's going to be using federal funds basically as a bludgeoning tool to push his his brand of education, which is patriotic education. Uh, through the American educational system. Whether you believe it, whether you don't believe it, whether you agree or disagree, that's not what we're here to talk about. We just want to review the facts so we can have more accuracy, and from there, we'll be able to decide, where to go next or what to do next. All right, so I came across a lot of interesting articles when I was doing research for this topic, and the one that I ended up spending most of my time on was Truth Out, and the headline specifically: Trump's education agenda for teachers, sanitizing U.S. history, or leave the field. And that is pretty much the sentiment right now when it comes to education. Teachers are feeling some kind of way. Parents are feeling some kind of way. They're sitting up watching CNBC, Fox News, CNN, and I get it. I understand it. You're concerned about the welfare and education of your children because you understand that their future depends on it. They have a whole life in front of them, and you understand that the more educated they are, the better equipped they'll be able to be to make a life for themselves in the future. Understandable. I believe that that's a genuine concern. Who wouldn't want the best for American youth? I believe we can all agree on that. But again, as I'm going through the article, I'm seeing a lot of things about, post-truth schooling. That's pretty much what they're branding Trump's educational plan, or his agenda, I should say, because it is going against what's been in place for the last roughly 4 years. Because remember, back in during Trump's first term, he signed an executive order for the education to be more of a patriotic education, because again they want to quote unquote embrace well, the goal is for them to embrace more patriotic values. That's the intent behind Trump's educational agenda. But again, from the school and the teachers and the administration's perspective, they're looking at it as because allegedly, they've said that Trump has said, quote unquote, a new credentialing body to certify teachers to embrace patriotic values. They believe that's one way he's gonna be able to try to, wield his influence on, imposing, his agenda, is by holding out funds for people who don't identify with the patriotic values when it comes to education. So again, most of the articles I read, talked about that. Um, just how, again, his plan ultimately is just to use federal funds at the end of the day, billions of dollars, to, go against critical race theory and use his brand of uncritical race theory or post-truth schooling in order to, in a sense, sanitize racism from the education of the youth, so that it's something that doesn't exist. And then for those who do bring it up, they should be punished, because in some, I believe Florida, there's book bans. There's bans on certain types of curriculum. Specifically, I believe it was African American studies. And this is their reasoning. This is why they're concerned. They don't want to, as far as the teachers are concerned, they don't want to be beholden to quote unquote not teaching the truth. Because again, things like slavery did happen. Things like concentration camps when America was in war with the Japanese. These things did happen. There's a lot of atrocities that America is guilty of. The government specifically, the move bombing. In Philadelphia, like things like that did happen, and I do believe it is important for American youth to be aware of the history of the country in which they reside in, so they can just have a better understanding of the fabric of this nation. So think of America like as a quilt in this regard. And again, we don't want to cut off pieces to try to pretend that they don't exist, because that hole is still in the quilt. So when the kids are looking out in the world, they're still going to be able to see those holes that we're trying to cut out. So I am not for that, personally, I should say. I do believe that the education in America needs to be objectively unbiased, solely the facts, and how people decide to interpret those facts is their decision. It isn't the decision of any man, government, or supreme being, in a sense, to dictate how people are interpreting the facts. The facts are the facts. Now, because I enjoy being accurate, and I was reading articles, and I'm basically saying again, the sentiment is very negative about Trump's educational agenda. So we got to go to see what the White House is talking about, see what they talking about. So the White House. So on January 29th, there was an executive order put out ending radical indoctrination in K through 12 schooling. Just want to read you a couple of things real quick. It says, from what I read, this specific policy is about not so here it is right here. It says, in recent years, however, parents have witnessed schools indoctrinate their children in radical anti-American ideologies while deliberately blocking parental oversight. Such an environment operates as an echo chamber in which students are forced to accept these ideologies without question or critical examination. In many cases, innocent children are compelled to adopt identities as either victims or oppressors solely based on their skin color or other immutable characteristics. In other instances, young men and women are made to question whether they were born in the wrong body and whether to view their parents and their realities as enemies to be blamed. These practices not only erode critical thinking, but also sow division, confusion, and distrust, which undermines the very foundation of personal identity and family unity. All right. So as we see there, this is what the presidential order is stating. Executive order, I should say. So it seems like, from what I'm reading here, that the mandate is to stop the practice of blocking parental oversight and imposing radical, quote unquote, radical anti-American ideologies. That seems to be the purpose of the policies for this executive order. So again, we have to understand language is key here. How they use language, you got to understand that. So in this case, so again, the people are concerned that the teachers are concerned uncritical, like their language now, the labels, critical race theory. So the teachers want to teach critical race theory, which is basically, we go teach the truth in regards to these are the facts that happen. Whereas uncritical race theory is more so trying to redress the interpretation of the facts. So as opposed to saying things like, for example, critical race theory wants to say George Washington owned slaves, whereas uncritical race theory wants to say George Washington employed indentured servants who happened to be of African American descent, which was of benefit to these Africans, these African who came from abroad and immigrated to America, because they were given a place to stay, they were given food, and all they had to do was just, earn their keep and work off their debts. And then they would be able to, have the quote unquote freedom. But that we know that wasn't the case at all. But that's why language is important. So specifically in the political realm, like they're gonna use labels, but you gotta understand the labels. So another one that you'll hear often when you're listening to government speak is quantitative easing, as an example. All quantitative easing means is printing money, but again, they specifically use quantitative easing as a means of, again, kind of talking over the average American citizen, so that you just be like, what, I don't even know what that is, and let me not even go look it up. That's not for me. When all they're basically talking about is printing money. So you got to like learn the terminology, learn the language, because that's the code that they're using to have. It's like they're having a conversation, but they're also having another conversation. So it's like one voice, but two conversations are happening, because most of the people don't understand the meaning behind these labels that are being used, whereas a small group of people do. And so that's really like the gist of it. So when we're going back to the executive order, again, they're using radical anti-American ideologies to basically talk about critical race theory, or the facts, people's interpretation of the facts of what happened at the end of the day. And so now the one thing I will agree with this order is blocking parental oversight. That is a problem. Parents need to be involved. But again, so we'll talk about it a little bit in the solution. No, we'll just wait for that. But again, so blocking parental oversight, yeah, we need to get away from that. So again, let's read a little bit more. It says imprinting anti-American subversive, harmful, and false ideologies on our nation's children not only violates long-standing anti-discrimination civil rights laws in many cases, but usurps basic parental authority. For example, steering students toward surgical and chemical mutilation without parental consent or involvement, or allowing males access to private spaces designated for females may contravene federal laws that protect parental rights, including the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act and the Protections of Pupil Rights Amendment, and sex-based equality and opportunity, including Title IX of the Educational Amendment of 1972. There's a lot. So again, my administration will enforce the law to ensure that recipients of federal funds providing K-12 education comply with all applicable laws prohibiting discrimination in various contexts and protecting parental rights, including Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. All right. So there's some definitions you can go read. Ending the indoctrination strategy. So they're giving them 90 days to put it to rest. But again, what are they giving them 90 days to put to rest? Now, it's the critical race theory. Like that's what they're. So again, the government, the White House is using language like, again, radical anti-American ideology to basically say critical race theory. All right. But you got to understand that. Because if you don't, then you just most likely go tap out. So what do they want to replace critical race theory with? Or, how do they want to redress people's interpretation of the facts? Reestablishing the Presidential Advisory 1776 Commission and promoting patriotic education. So again, remember back in 2020, Trump signed an executive order in November for that. This educational, patriotical education. So here's what it basically boils down to. It says, where is it at? So they want, where was it at? A little bit more. All right, the 1776 Commission, which is basically the oversight for patriotic education. Facilitate the development and implementation of a quote unquote presidential 1776 award to recognize student knowledge of the American founding, including knowledge of the founders, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitutional Convention, and the great soldiers and battles of the American Revolutionary War. So in a sense, the 1776 Commission and this patriotic education, like, so they want to go away from, because remember what they said, they don't want education where people feel, divided based upon the color of their skin, where they have to choose a side between being a victim and an oppressor. That's basically what they're talking about. But that's their way of talking about critical race theory. Let's go back to it real quick, because that's something very important. In many cases, innocent children are compelled to adopt identities as either victims or oppressors solely based on their skin color and other immutable characteristics. Because again, it says parents trust America's school to provide their children with a rigorous education and to instill a patriotic admiration for our incredible nation and the values for which we stand. So that's their vision for American education. And they're going to make it happen through the 1776 Commission, which wants to primarily focus on making sure kids are educated on about the founding of America, specifically the founders, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitutional Convention, and the great soldiers and battles of the American Revolutionary War. So but again, so as I just said that and thought about their point of not wanting people to be compelled to choose identities based where they are either a victim or an oppressor. How does that dynamic work in regards to the American Revolutionary War? So are the British viewed as the oppressor and America the victim? Because we already know when it comes to critical race theory, they want to, again, when you start talking about the history of America, slavery is a big part of that. Again, it quote unquote compels the kids to choose a side based upon the color of their skin. So again, if you're talking about U.S. history, you're talking about slavery, then again, their point of why they want to get rid of critical race theory is because we don't want the kids to, like you said, have to choose a side. We don't want the quote unquote Americans of Caucasian or European descent to feel that they are, that they're the oppressor, because, the white man is branded as the oppressor in this case. And they don't want, well, I can't say they don't, or they're saying they don't want, the quote unquote, Americans of African descent, the black kids, the African American kids, they don't want them to feel like they're the victims. And from a big picture, like, I would definitely agree with the sentiment. We want people to feel empowered. We want people to be collaborators. We don't want them to be victims or oppressors. We want them to be collaborators. And this is their way of trying to do that. But again, we just have to be mindful of the fact that, this specific, and again, the elephant in the room here overall is slavery did happen. America has a history of slavery where there were quote unquote white people that quote unquote oppressed black people as and who were victims of white people's oppression. That is true. But again, that is my interpretation of what happened. And so the facts of what happened was, again, there were Europeans who had boats. So they say there were Europeans who had boats that traveled down to the coast of Africa. They exchanged, trinkets, resources for people. So physical resources for human resources. They then took those human resources, to this new world as their property, and denied them basic quote unquote human rights, and subjugated them to a life of free labor, work without pay or compensation or any freedoms or civil liberties. That is what happened. And that is a history that again, a lot of Americans of European descent don't want their kids to be taught because they don't want their kids to quote unquote feel as if they are oppressors. But again, you got Americans of African descent and native descent who do want that history taught because again, it shows them for their true colors. But again, we're not going to get caught up in whether it should or shouldn't be done because again, we don't talk about the shoulds because life doesn't turn out the way it should. It doesn't turn out the way it shouldn't. It just turns out the way it does. And as it's turning out the way it does, this is life turning out the way it does. So there was another executive order on the 29th expanding educational freedom and the opportunity for families. So this one was more so again about giving parents the choice to choose where their kid wants to go to school as opposed to it being the government's choice to send the kid to a school based upon their residency or zip code. So directing funds that give parents the ability to hear this. Parents want and deserve the best education for their children, but too many children do not thrive in their assigned government-run K-12 school. According to this year's National Assessment of Educational Progress, 70% of 8th graders were below proficient in reading and 72% were below proficiency in math. Moreover, geographically based school assignments exacerbate the cost of housing in districts with preferred schools, strain the finances of millions of American families sacrificing for their children's future. When our public education system fails such a large segment of society, it hinders our national competitiveness and devastates families and communities. For this reason, more than a dozen states have enacted universal K-12 scholarship programs, allowing families rather than the government to choose the best educational setting for their children. These states have highlighted the most promising avenue for education reform, educational choice for families and competition for residentially assigned government-run public schools. The growing body of rigorous research demonstrates that well-designed educational freedom programs improve student achievement and cause nearby public schools to improve their performance. It is the policy of this administration to support parents in choosing and directing the upbringing and education of their children. All right. So that's what the order says. So the first one was about, replacing, the quote unquote radical ideologies, non-American ideology that that subvert, I'll just say, unity, American unity. And then this next one is about and replacing it with a more patriotical education that focuses on making sure the kid understands the founding of the country, and to next making sure that parents have the power to choose where they send their school. So that's so far what I've been able to find about Trump's education agenda. So if you have interpreted this as him wanting to sanitize racism from history, I can't say that you're right or wrong, because he himself has said he wants to get rid of critical race theory, which we know is another code or language for teaching that there was slavery existed, and if there was a disproportionate power dynamic between quote unquote whites and quote unquote blacks or non-whites. That was true. That happened. Those things, that is part of America's history. So that's a decision you're going to have to make. So solutions, again, I'm always of the belief, be the president of your own household, so you ain't got to worry about who's the president in Washington, D.C. So by being the president of your own household, that means that you are your own president of the department of your own household's education. So you oversee what happens in your household when it comes to your children's education. Granted, I understand that education is compulsory for children from K through 12, meaning that it's mandatory that they do have to attend some sort of institution, whether it be a public, private, or homeschooling. And as parents, I understand you guys already have tons of stuff on your plate. You're bursting at the seams. You're drowning in obligations and responsibilities already. And the last thing you need to do is a new responsibility of educating your child. I know, but the reality is your child's future depends on it, so you're going to have to buckle down and make it happen and do what needs to be done. And what needs to be done specifically is now that we have this next generation of children coming up, Gen Beta specifically, early education is the solution. That is the resolve. We have to start educating children early. So specifically, my vote would be in STEM. Uh, Start, establishing a strong STEM foundation early, expose them to STEM early, all these STEM concepts early. So STEM being science, technology, engineering, and math, because again, we know that our proficiency, for American youth at the 8th grade level is not where it needs to be. You know what I mean? Specifically when it comes to reading and mathematics. So mathematics being a part of STEM, we got to start that early in the process so that we can establish a image of education being a pleasurable activity for children as opposed to a painful one, because children are still humans, and like all human beings, we are driven to prioritize maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain at all costs. So we have to maximize pleasure by making sure we guide American youth into a positive and pleasurable image of education and what it means and what they get from it, so that as they are coming up, they're enjoying it. And because again, if we're waiting, because think of it like baking a cake, we got the ingredients together, mom and dad put the baby in the oven, and then the oven, then the baby was delivered, now the cake is out, you know what I'm saying? But over the years, you know what I'm saying, like that cake is you pretty much got to from birth to 8, to still kind of work on that cake. By the time that cake is 18 years old, it is what it's gonna be. So it's chocolate cake, it's strawberry, it's vanilla, it's cinnamon swirl, it's whatever it is, but that's what it is. You know what I mean? And that ain't the time to then try to turn a chocolate cake into the yellow cake. Like, it's too late. But that seems to be what we want to do. So how can we avoid that? We start early. We if we know we want the cake to be yellow, then we don't have to allow it just to do whatever it wants to do or be whatever it wants to be. And it wants to be strawberry, so we just let it be strawberry, because at that moment in time, it just like what strawberry looked like. Like, no, we want it to be yellow. You're the parent, so guide them down the path of yellow. And it's just that simple. Again, whatever's happening on a government level is things that you can't control in your household, but you get to have control of your household. You are in command. So don't take that for granted. Be the president. What is your policy when it comes to education? You're gonna have to make sure that they are gonna have to go to school, most likely, for the average student. They're gonna go to somebody's schoolhouse, but when they come home from that schoolhouse, like, you can still like education never stops. Education begins at home. So the real education is gonna begin when the kid comes home and it's just you two. So I understand that there's gonna be sacrifice, but that's what makes it, but it's your kids, and that's what makes it worth it. So, for example, it's like, as I've been thinking about it lately, what makes, I would imagine, my theory, at least, I had a new theory when it just came to relationships now. So, why a woman wants a man to buy her things. Um, there are some exploiting blind spot aspects of it, but or she views that as an investment, because maybe in her mind, she's viewing it as if this man is willing to make a sacrifice by buying something that he don't care about, that he knows I cares about, that's supposed to mean that he loves me. You know what I mean? Or, maybe that's what they mean by when they're saying that, men pay for things that they care about. Um, but in my mind, like, that's just a basic human trait. You know what I'm saying? It's not necessarily a man thing or a gender based thing. It's just a display of selflessness. But again, I'm going to make a sacrifice to do something that might not necessarily provide me any upfront, pleasure or benefit. But I know that from a long term perspective, it's going to benefit me, because it's going to benefit the kid. And so I think that that's how we have to start looking at this situation. So yeah, you're going to have to maybe sacrifice a couple of your favorite TV shows when you get home from work, or aimlessly scrolling on social media to sit with your child. All I'm asking for is 30 minutes a day, an hour a week, and one presentation a month. And, we can make it happen. So again, specifically when it comes to history, though, You be the, like I said, you're the president, so you teach your children about their history. Whatever their ethnic background is, whatever y'all's ethnic background is, like teach them. There's books out there. There's documentaries. There's plenty of information. There's plenty of tools and resources out there. Like you just have to guide your child to it. They don't have a choice. Yes, I'm. They don't have a choice. You are the in command here, so they do what you tell them to do. You feel me? So last but not least, action. So again, what is that action is going to look like moving forward? Start preparing American youth for the future today with early STEM education in the home. We don't have to wait till they're, your 2-year old, your 5-year old, your 7-year old, your 8-year old. They don't have to wait until they get to middle school, high school, or college to start studying STEM, to start becoming proficient in STEM. They can start now. You can start them now. I have a plan for us to do it. It utilizes free tools. And again, all you gotta do is just guide your child along the way. Sit with them for 30 minutes a day. That's it. That's the basic. And again, whether they're small, starting in my mind, too, as soon as they can start talking and starting identifying letters and words, and they get able to look at videos and understand what happens, they're ready to start learning STEM. And again, that can be 2 years old. Because that's what we got to understand. Vision is the first way we learn, and the technology is in play now. Where, from an educational perspective, we can learn visually. There's resources available for us, and so again, um, action plan. The American Youth STEM Home Training Plan. That's basically a curriculum I've developed, and it's the kid has to complete X amount of units. I believe it's like 128 to reach level 1 STEM status. But again, they're gonna learn. They're gonna dabble in science, technology, engineering, and math from, in my mind, from 2 to 18. That's basically what, 16 years. So from roughly 50, we'll just keep the math simple. So we'll say 15 years. We got 15 years of STEM training that we can put these kids through. So by the time that they turn 18, they have real world STEM skills. Another part of the curriculum is they'll be bilingual and they'll be financially literate. So they'll be well prepared in a position to, get a, to have a fulfilling and financially stable STEM career. And I know that we can make this happen. I'm here to help you make it happen. I'm here to be your guide so that you can be your child's guide, so that your child can be the hero of their story. All right, we don't have to be the children's. We're not our children's hero. They are their own hero. We just have to be the guide and provide them with the knowledge, the tools, and the resources to be able to develop the self governance and self restraint to be able to move forward in life. All right, it begins with us. So now that we know, like I said, we've discussed the Trump's educational plan. We've talked about how the people basically are looking at it, and how the government is basically looking at it, and how they're both sides is using language to basically you know to redress their interpretation of the facts of what happened in the situation. The elephant in the room being ultimately slavery. Like, that's really the elephant in the room. And we talked about, regardless of what, either side is doing, at the end of the day, the solution, you as the president of your own household, you have a educational policy that you're responsible for implementing in your own household. And you have to do that. You have to take command and control of your child's education. You can't be concerned about, what you think that the quote unquote educational system should be teaching them or shouldn't be teaching them, because they're going to do what they're going to do because they're in control of it. So you have to control what you can control, which is what they learn when they're with you. And the action steps. So what are they going to learn when they're with you? Then my recommendation, the American Youth STEM Home Training Plan. It's a simple STEM curriculum that the kid can be able to complete over the next 15 years of their upbringing. All you gotta do as a parent is just guide them through 30 minutes a day to work on sections. Excuse me, 30 sections, 30, sit with them for 30 minutes a day so they can work on the section, and boom, an hour a week to work on a STEM based project, a hands-on STEM project, and then 1 hour a month where they go ahead and present one of their projects for the month. So when it comes to that project, hour a week, in most projects on the resource that is within the home training plan, only take anywhere from 90 minutes, anywhere from 30 to 90 minutes. So again, whether they're completing one new project, STEM hands-on STEM project a week or one a month, my thing is just do one at a bare minimum, do one and have them present it, because again, it's a full circle process. And we have, because again, the big picture here too is we have to start getting them to associate pleasure with education and learning. And one way we can do that is, again, the presentation is a kid. Every kid wants to look at me, look at me. So that's attention. Attention is pleasurable. So that's one way we can infuse or fuse attention to education and learning, so it is viewed as a pleasurable experience with the kid. All right. So if you have any questions, I'm here to help. You know what I mean? My thing is just education begins at home, and just take command of your position as the president of your household and know that, you know, you have the power to implement your own educational curriculum outside of what they learn in the American educational system. Because again, we are seeing, according to this year's National Assessment of Educational Progress, 70% of 70% of eighth graders were below proficient in reading, and 72 were below proficient in math. So that means that an overwhelming majority of American youth can't read and they cannot do math, or they have a hard time understanding it and being successful at using it. So that means that, again, we are sending them to school every day, and this is the result. This is the progress that's being made. Well over half, 70, close to 3/4. So that, think about that. That means 7 out of 10 kids are below proficiency in reading and math. And this is this is the progress that the American educational system has made up until this point. So how do we fix that? Education begins at home. It's on us now. As the adults in these households, it's on us. All right. So if you have any questions, I'm here to help. You can check out the link to download the American Youth STEM Home Training Plan. And again, I'm here to help. Peace.